Hello everyone and welcome back to another Blender 3D exercise. So today we're going to do something fun and we are going to make a potion bottle similar to the Minecraft potion bottle design. And I say similar because the way that we're going to do this, we can't really do a one-to-one on the pixel art that Minecraft uses because we're going to have to modify it a little bit to get it to have some nice properties when we move from 2D to 3D, but it's going to be pretty close. And if you were to actually have a 3D version of the Minecraft potion bottle, it'd probably be pretty close to what we're going to make. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to delete our cube because for this, we're actually going to need a plane. And so now we're going to move into edit mode, and the first thing we're going to do is we are going to rotate around the x-axis 90 degrees so that it's standing straight up. And then we are going to move up on the z-axis 1, just so the bottom of the plane is touching the little green dot in the center. And that's so our the bottom of our bottle basically is going to be resting on the ground. And so now I'm going to do a front view and kind of center it a little bit, and we are going to subdivide, and you just want to subdivide once. And so now I'm going to move into face selection. I'm going to select these two faces and get rid of them, and I'm going to delete faces. And so now we're left with one half of our bottle, or one half of our plane, which is going to be used to make our bottle or kind of blueprint it. So now I'm going to select everything and we're going to do another subdivide. And this time we're going to put in quite a few cuts. And it's very important here, I'm going to actually increment this all the way up to 20. And the reason that we're using such small blocks is the width of the blocks here is actually going to be the thickness of your bottle. And so we want our bottle to be pretty thin. We're not going to use all of these squares, but this gives us a nice kind of a nice amount to work with. And some of you guys may already see kind of where I'm going with this. We're going to kind of pixel art out the bottle. So we're only going to do half of it. And so I'm going to start by, don't want that, start by holding down shift and selecting a few things. And then I believe it's 4. And then 1, 2. And then 2 here. And then like that, but we're not going to, we're going to leave this open like this and just do that instead. So like I said, this isn't going to be a one-to-one, but this will get the job done. And so the next thing we're going to do, so you don't want any points here where we're only going to have one vertex because that's going to look really funky when we try to revolve. And so instead we're going to kind of clean this up a little bit and make sure that we have kind of these stair-step patterns. And so this looks pretty good. This looks like what we want. And so now we're going to actually invert our selection and we're going to delete all of these faces. And so this is what we want. This is kind of the profile of our bottle. It's kind of like someone took a cross section of it. But we're not quite done yet. So we're going to switch into working with vertices and we're going to select all 3 of these corners. And we're going to select these, and we're going to select these, and then we're going to select these. Basically, what we're fixing to do is we're fixing to kind of smooth out these edges. So you want to select all the corners that are kind of, a good way to look at this is picture if the corners weren't there and you made triangles from here to here, you want this to kind of form a straight edge. And so let me hit X, and we are going to pick, very important, you don't want to delete vertices, you want to dissolve vertices. And when you do that, you notice it does exactly what I said. It makes a straight edge. And now we've got something that looks pretty nice, like it actually kind of looks more like a bottle shape. Okay? And so now we're going to switch to working with edges, and we are going to loop select the outside of our bottle. And very important, you want to make sure that this edge right here is not selected. If it is, unselect it, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to invert our selection so that we have everything except for the outside of our bottle, we're going to delete. And the option you want is only edges and faces. And so that leaves us with the outside of our bottle, and there is a vertex right here, and it's sneaky. You have to go to 1 working with vertices to see it, and so we're going to click that and get rid of it. And so now we've got just this frame of our bottle, and this is what we want. And so now with everything selected, we're going to go down to the spin tool, which if you remember, it looks kind of like a pie. And I'm just going to rotate it a little bit. And I'm going to change the angle to 360 just to make sure that it connects. And we're going to up the number of segments to, let's try 20. Yeah, that looks good, just to give it kind of a smoother shape, like more cylindrical. Okay, and so once you're happy with the way that looks, you can go ahead and go back to the select box tool and click off. But we're not quite done here. So if you remember what I said in Module 3 when we talked about the spin tool, it doesn't actually close out the edge. Like there's just basically 2 rows of vertices stacked up where we revolved around. So right here, I think at the y-axis. And so we're going to select everything. We're going to make sure that we're working with vertices. We're going to right click, go to merge vertices, and by distance. And you notice that yes, it did remove some vertices. So now we have a closed shape. But you know, the spin tool is notorious for this, and I think it's because you kind of have to merge to get a closed shape. It has a really bad habit of screwing up the normals for your shape, and so while we have everything selected, I'm just going to preemptively shift in to recalculate my normals and make sure that our bottle shape is actually, you know, smooth and everything's okay before I start trying to do operations. And so now, you know, this looks fine, but it's a little low poly or a little low res, so we're going to smooth this out a bit. And so I'm going to go ahead and just, you want to make sure to be working with edges when you do this because you don't want these vertical edges here. But I'm going to just loop select a few things here. So on the top that, and we'll go ahead and bevel that. Again, this is just to add some definition. Let's see how. Yeah, there we go. For this, we're going to bevel this, and this is kind of an alternate way of doing the what I talked about during the mug revisit and what I talked about during lesson 4, how you want to scrunch lines up to the very edge. You can also do kind of a bevel, and it accomplishes the same thing, and just you really almost want them to be overlapping. And same thing here, and this will give us a nice sharp edge when we add our subdivision surface modifier. And again, very, very important, almost overlapping. In fact, let me move further out so I can get a little more precision. It's that important. There we go. All right, and so now I'm going to select this, and then same thing, bevel that, and just want to make sure, like I said, this should give me a nice, like you can see, it's already looking a lot more like a bottle and a lot less like faceted. Okay, and so that looks pretty good. And so let's go ahead and shade smooth, and you see it already kind of looks pretty decent, but we'll go ahead and add a subdivision surface on top of it and popped it up to 2 levels. And yeah, now you see we've got a pretty nice looking bottle. And you can clean it up a little bit after you do this, like, you know, maybe if you turn on proportional editing, maybe, oops, way too big. Maybe bring that out a little bit, just a tad. You don't want to go too crazy. And maybe do the, go and loop select this and do the opposite, kind of bring it in. Oh, you don't want to do that too much. Okay, maybe not. We'll leave that alone. And we'll let's bring this down. Actually, we'll turn off proportional editing for that one. Kind of flatten the top of it just a tad. Yeah. So now we've got a pretty nice bottle, but we're not quite done. So let's talk about the liquid inside the bottle. And so there is a really quick and dirty way to get the liquid inside the bottle, and I'm going to show it to you. So for this, we're going to need to go into wireframe, and the reason is we want to target that center vertex inside the bottle. And so I'm going to go working with vertices, and I would definitely recommend rotating around a little bit and make sure you have the bottom of the inside. And so now I'm just going to use numpad plus to kind of go up to the level to where, this looks like a good level for our potion bottle. Like, this looks like a good, acceptable amount of potion for there to be in the bottle. If you wanted your potion bottle to be a little fuller, you can go up to there. There's really no wrong answer. This is up to you. And so now we're going to use Shift D to duplicate. And we haven't done this since the first lesson, but you notice just like in object mode, you can actually duplicate parts of your mesh. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit escape just to leave it in place. And now here comes the cool part. So if I tap the P key, you notice I get a menu with selection material and by loose parts. And the one we're interested in is selection because all that's selected. Now when I do that, it doesn't look like anything happened, but if you look in the property manager, I now have plane and plane 001. And so if we go back into object mode and I hide plane, and if I go back into solid, you notice the inside of our bottle is now a separate object. Now, it also still exists inside the bottle. And it's very important to make sure you duplicate the geometry before you do that P trick. Otherwise, it'll actually take the geometry you have selected out of the model. And we don't want that. We want this to be a duplicate object. Okay, so let's rename plane bottle real quick, just because now we have multiple pieces and it's starting to get, kind of tricky. And so we're going to rename plane 001 as potion. Okay, and we are going to go ahead and make potion visible and hide bottle. And one thing I really want to point out real quick is you notice over here there is, if I select this, there's already a modifier. So when you duplicate part of the mesh and make it a new selection, it actually copies any modifiers that were on the parent. So that's a really useful tip to know, and it kind of goes back to what I've been talking about all along, that order really matters in Blender. So the order in which you do things matters. So if you didn't want that modifier to be on there, you would want to duplicate before adding the modifiers. But in this case, no, this is actually okay. We want the inside to match the outside. And so this is exactly what we want. So we're going to go into edit mode real quick, and we are going to fix the top of this because, we want this is supposed to be a liquid, so we want it to actually be a closed volume. And so working with edges, I'm going to loop select this and just do our ES trick. Get used to doing this, by the way. This is a very, very common trick in Blender, especially working with circles. And then go ahead and hit F, and I'll loop select this, and we'll do a bevel for this. And this is just to add, like I said, a sharp edge, just to make it look like that liquid is really, really separate from the top of the glass. And so now we've got our potion done, and like I said, if I re-add bottle, you can't, if you look down, you can kind of see. This is more of, once we get into materials, we're going to do some stuff with this and really make it look cool. But for now, this will be fine. And so I'm going to go ahead and keep the bottle visible for now, because the last thing we need to add to this is our cork. And so to do that, we're going to start out with a cylinder. It's huge. And so we're going to go into edit mode, and we're going to really scale this down. And then move it up, scale. And I mean, you can kind of eyeball this. We're going to fine tune it in a sec. But for now, it's okay. And you can even go into, Shift Z and kind of work it down a little bit. Make sure that it's the length. Like if you want kind of a shorter cork, this would be the place to do it. Or if you want a longer one, You see, this is a little short for what we're wanting, so we might want it to be a little longer. So let's go ahead and scale in the Z-axis and go ahead and make that a little bit longer of a cork. Yeah, there we go. And now for the fine tuning I was talking about. So I'm going to go to overhead view with 7, and we're going to make our cork match these lines right here. So just about right there. And perfect. All right. So now let me hide the bottle and go ahead and hide the potion just so that we can focus on this. And this is okay for a base cork shape, but for instance, if I go in here and shade smooth, this doesn't look very natural. And so we're going to use the tip that I talked about. I can't remember if I talked about it with module 3 or 4, but we're going to give this some extra geometry to make it a little more natural looking. So I'm going to delete the top of my cylinder and also the bottom. And I'm going to add some loop cuts to the side. I mean, this you can kind of eyeball it, that you don't need a specific amount of loops or anything. This is just to kind of break up the geometry. And then I'm going to loop select the top and do my ES trick. Go ahead and close it out. And for this, I'll actually do Control 7, and I'll line up the lines just so that the top and the bottom are, okay, I already had it selected. Just so the top and the bottom line up and the geometry is symmetrical. Again, this is just my own kind of compulsive tick. No need to copy if you don't feel like doing it. Eyeballing it is good enough. And then close that out. Alright, and then last thing we're going to do is we're going to select the top and bottom, and we're going to do a bevel and just really, really slight. And there we go. So now we've got a cork that has some much nicer properties. And we'll go ahead and add a subdivision surface to this as well. Just because you did see it kind of gives the edges a little more definition. I don't think we need to go to 2 though, 1 is fine. And so now go ahead and make the potion in the bottle visible. And we are all set for when we start working with materials, and we'll make this thing look super cool when we get into that. But for now, this about wraps it up for the bottle. I go ahead and save. And I'll go ahead and, just because as you can see, there's a lot of different bottles that I've made. And so I'll go ahead and save bottle 2 for you guys, just so that I can have a little consistency when we move back to materials. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next exercise.